a curse. Supposedly the curse said, "Here lies the great king, and whoso disturbs this tomb, on him may the curse of Pharaoh rest. Death shall come on swift wings." 6 months later, the Earl of Carnarvon, backer of the expedition, dropped dead in Cairo of an infection caused by a mosquito. Others from the expedition died mysteriously over the next decade. Happenstance, of course. People do die. And Howard Carter, who opened the tomb, lived to the ripe age of 66. Nevertheless, the public took a fancy to the concept of mummies, ancient curses, and revenge stretching through the centuries. 10 years after the discovery of Tut's tomb, Universal Pictures commissioned a story by Nina Wilcox Putnam for their star, Boris Karloff. Her scenario told of an ancient magician who repeatedly murders the incarnations of the woman who betrayed him. He becomes a master criminal in San Francisco with a radio death ray and a television burglary device. John Balderston wisely rewrote the plot along the lines of Dracula. Edward Van Sloan and David Manners repeated their respective roles from that film.
Now I know his horrible plan. He is going to kill her and make her a living mummy like himself.
But the main attraction, of course, was Boris Karloff.
You will not remember what I show you now, and yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death.
Jack Pierce, of course, just worked hand in glove with my father on the makeup and actually fashioned it to my father's facial contour.
I believe it might have been Caro syrup and cotton or tissue and layers of it, or the cotton and collodion material, and you stretch it, and it'll, after it dries, you can form wrinkles, and then you cover it up with a heavy makeup.
It took Jack Pierce about 4 hours. It was quite a job. And once it was on, it was on.
When they talk about all the time in the makeup chair, that was for that scene. I mean, that was rubber on his face, or, you know, there was all sorts of stipple and Fuller's Earth.
After remakes of Frankenstein and Dracula, Hammer Films contracted with Universal to revive the long-dead Caris and his princess Amanka.
Hammer Films had 2 producers at the time, Anthony Hines and Michael Carreras. Hines produced The Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula. Dracula was later released in the United States as The Horror of Dracula.
Tony didn't think the Mummy was serious enough. I mean, by this time he's now steeped in the true Gothics, and it's quite true, the Mummy is a little bit more colourful and a little bit more adventurous. I like doing it.
The plot and the characters were an amalgam of the Universal films, with accent on sudden action.
I like that Mummy. It's a distinctly different Mummy, and as much as you can make a mummy, you've got to deal with somebody wrapped in bandages, but the portion of Christopher Lee's face that shows is almost gnarled in a different way than wrinkles. Certainly gives good play to the eyes. I remember that. You know, whatever it is, there's enough to really offset the eyes. Again, you know, Lee pushing himself to perform through the mummy makeup to give something to the mummy, because we never get a chance to see the mummy in human form there.
Go now. Go and destroy those who desecrated the tomb of our princess. He who robs the graves of Egypt dies. 'Tis 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 'tis
goes out to all my fellow mummies, past and present. I think I did more stunts in that film than in all previous mummy films strung together. I did things in that film that Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't do, and rightly so. There was a door I burst through at one point. The carpenters forgot to loosen it. I crashed through all right and dislocated my shoulder in the process. And in another scene, I crashed through some French windows. Real glass, not sugar glass, from the prop shop. So there I was, stuck through my bandages like a hedgehog. Peter Cushing shoots me with a shotgun, and these explosive squibs left powder burns here for weeks. And I had to carry Yvonne Furneaux for what seemed like miles. 120 pounds, at least, of inert womanhood. I pulled every muscle in my back, practically. I can understand why playing the mummy wasn't Lon Chaney's favourite role. A book by William Seabrook called The Magic Isle introduced America and Europe to concepts that had held the island of Haiti in a grip of mortal fear for more than 300 years. The religion is called Voodoo, a complex amalgam of African folk magic, Christianity, and elemental psychology. The most horrifying aspect of this belief is the zombie, a corpse reanimated by magic, forced to carry out the will of the master magician while in a state of living death. Seabrook wrote that he had actually seen a zombie stalking through the sugarcane fields under the light of the full moon. Within a few years, movie audiences around the world would see a great many more of them. White Zombie was made less than a year after Dracula, and in fact, the producers rented some of the sets from Universal. It has Lugosi at his most malevolent as Murder Legendre, a diabolical voodoo master.
Who are you? And what are they?
For you, my friend, they are the angels of death.
The producers also borrowed Universal's chief makeup artist, Jack Pierce, to design Lugosi's imposing makeup.
My father once told me that when he was making the picture White Zombie, I don't know if it was a low budget or there was problems with the director, but the director left, and my father did part of the directing of that motion picture. And I remember that he liked the experience and wished that he had opportunities to direct again. That's one of my 5 or 6 favorites of his movies also.
The same producers tried to mine a similar vein 5 years later, with less effective results. A close-up of Bela Lugosi's eyes was used for that of the disembodied zombie master. I Walked with a Zombie is generally regarded as the most sophisticated treatment of the classic voodoo premise. It was terrifying in that its most ghastly elements were left unseen and left to the audience's imagination.
Are you trying to tell me that the voodoo priest could cure Mrs. Holland?
Better doctors.
Zambala, this woman is ill.
Val always had the theory that the greatest fear that people have is fear of the unknown. What's in that shadow back there? You hear that? What's in that noise? Who made that noise? What is that? That kind of thing. It's been a year since I've seen it, but I thought it was quite an extraordinary concept, as most of Luton's films had, you see. And I thought it was beautifully realized, beautifully done, and I hope people who know Luton's work at all, I hope that's one of the films I see of his.
Not all zombies are from Haiti, of course. Some are apparently from Mars. Leonard Nimoy played the hollow-eyed invader some years before he donned pointed ears for his role as Mr. Spock. Aliens revived the dead as an unthinking zombie army.
Within 3 days, the dead will destroy all the living.
In the clunker called Invisible Invaders, featuring the ubiquitous John Carradine.
I am from another planet, outside your galaxy.
The Sam Katzman B-movie unit at Columbia Pictures tried a topical update in 1956, Nuclear-Powered Zombies. For those who care about such esoterica, this was the first film in which explosive squib effects were used to kill zombies.
Yeah, I remember that. That was one I had to really use my imagination on. For example, in a car scene, you're driving along and it used to have to use the backdrop thing and run the film on it, and you're sitting in the car and the screen is in back of you and you can't see, but you're driving, somebody's going like this in front of you telling you how to drive.
Dave, did they? No.
Well, I don't remember how the project began, except that they needed a horror story, and I came up with a title, and let's do an underwater zombie picture, because I never saw an underwater zombie picture before, and they thought that was a grand idea. I remember this one scene where there they are in this cave underwater, and the zombies come to life, which zombies have to do in a movie about zombies, and they were all in coffins, of course, and the coffins were lined up around this room in the stage, about 6 or 8, 10 coffins, I don't know how many, and there they're shooting, and the zombies come to life, and they start to climb out of the coffins. Well, it was damn hard to climb out of a coffin, you know, and they're very clumsy, and they're falling all over themselves. They look like anything but threatening zombies.
The image of these slow-moving sleepwalkers changed radically in 1967.
I don't think I go too far at all. In fact, I'm always looking to try to deliver more, because the film is played for the fans, and whatever the critics of this kind of stuff say, they're going to say it, whether I do 1 effect or 20 effects or 30 effects, and people that don't like it are never going to like it, and I don't expect them to like it. And it doesn't matter. Getting that involuntary response from the audience gives you a real charge. I imagine it's something akin to what a stand-up comedian goes through when he's really pulling good laughs. People go to see a bloody film to see bloody scenes. Is that sick? I don't think it's any more sick than people's attraction to the Indianapolis 500 in the hopes of seeing an exploding car or someone's actual limbs getting spread all over the asphalt. I think that's sicker.
Producer George Romero and screenwriter John Russo received kudos and rave reviews for their production of Night of the Living Dead. In reality, the film is an adaptation of Richard Matheson's book entitled I Am Legend. It's the story of a man living on a planet inhabited by only vampires. The original adaptation of the book was filmed in 1965 in Italy, starring Vincent Price, and it's called The Last Man on Earth. Visually, it's a blueprint of Night of the Living Dead.
At the height of the era of black exploitation films of the 1970s, producer Paul Maslansky combined modern gore effects, a black cast, and classic revenge with Sugar Hill.
My friends call me Sugar.
The foxiest,
Looking for anything special?
sexiest, deadliest chick in town.
I myself ended up on the receiving end of some voodoo vengeance in the oblong box.
in the oblong box, there was a prince, an African prince, who was somehow involved with this dance troupe that starts it off. And they're really authentic. That happened to be in London at the time. So we decided to incorporate it in the picture. And I met this prince, African prince, and asked Vincent if he wouldn't mind joining in the commissary, to entertain him, because we thought he was an important person. And, that's. But Vincent knew more about Africa, about his region, about the art in that thing. He talked the whole way through the lunch, all about Africa. I was floored, and this prince was absolutely flabbergasted at his knowledge. And this is Vincent. He's a very, very different kind of a person.
My brother Edward has died. Where is he going to be buried? As soon as you found another body.
Waking up in that horrible oblong box. No air to breathe. Every shovelful raining down on the lid.
My God, Trench, do you know what that means? It means that my brother was buried alive.
I never was that impressed with it as the critics were.
They only come out at night. They're mean, rude, and dead. Not them. Them.
There's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100?
The dead are refusing to remain buried.
What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? We're gonna call the boss.
They've come back to life. They're hungry. And they're not vegetarians.
That graveyard out there's full of people coming out of the ground.
We have a little problem.
What the hell is going on there?
Rabbit weasels.
What?
More brain.
I was shocked when I saw the completed film because I didn't know what Dan O'Bannon was going to do with it, and I didn't know what music was going to be in it. I didn't know anything, and when I saw it, it was real thrilling. They did a bunch of different makeups that were very long and hard to deal with. So yeah. Plus, I was painted in a lot of scenes where I came back as a zombie all white, so I had people like touching me for hours and hours and hours, which gets to you. Mud or Rain I'm wearing in Return of the Living Dead. Now that, for some reason, I felt a little safer because they had made me like a G-string type thing that covered me. But, in that, it's like a lot of my shyness went away only because I was so miserably cold.
Do you want to play? It's party time! What are you gonna play? It's party time! Do you want to play?
They're back from the grave and ready to party.
It's party time!
Since the Living Dead pictures and the zombie genre they've inspired, makeup artists from England, Italy, and the United States find themselves in sharp competition, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak.
There was a big problem about how to get the red eyes and the white eyes, which were necessary. Once they were zombie-ized by the creature, the eyes turned white. Well, that was easy because we just did plastic inserts into the eyes, like contact lenses. And we had a doctor on the set because of the danger of infection.
What was in there? I told you, a fossil, part ape, part man. It lived 2 million years ago.
The big problem was how to make the eyes glow red for the monster and for the people who became the monster. I kept pleading with them to use reflective material of the kind that's used on road signs, and it never worked out. And they finally came up with a very satisfactory solution, putting a red glass contact lens, building the eye up with that, and then putting a little light under that, which was controlled by wires and batteries. And when they pushed the battery, the light glowed behind the red glass, and there was a red eye, and it's worked very well. And their idea was better than mine in that case.
It's hard to express ideas without, or technical expertise without the ideas behind it, but I always thought it'd be neat to see the inner power of a nuclear being, through as if it's powering, as if it's brought this zombie back to life.
some gun magically raise a corpse into living death? Or is the victim actually alive under hypnotic or chemical control? Well, that's hard to say.
Films like this one were cheaply produced, but they still delivered what fans really wanted. Plenty of atmosphere and decidedly creepy characters. Ancient Egyptians looked upon mummification as a holy rite. The last thing in their minds was the image of a bandaged fiend stalking through the night to strangle its victims. But the awe and mystery that surrounded the opening of Tut's tomb in 1922 was still in evidence when his golden mask and burial artifacts toured the world a few years ago.
Mummies have been around for several thousand years. Mummy movies have stood the test of time for more than half a century. If the past is any indication of the future, both will be around forever.